These 4 books I'm about to share with you all share one idea that was considered extremely dangerous, not because it was wrong, but because what it implied about regular people like you and me. Each one of these points to the same uncomfortable thing that the authorities and the church did not want spread, that ordinary people just might have more creative power than they're supposed to. Now, if you're already rolling your eyes, I get it. I would too. That is until you realize this was not ancient self-help. These 4 banned books were written by philosophers, theologians, monks, and mathematicians. So what was actually in these books that got them treated like such a threat? But once you see for yourself what they were all pointing at, modern manifestation talks sort of feel shallow. You see, when most people hear the term banned books, they assume the problem was the message. But with this first book, the problem just wasn't what was said, it was how it was said. Steganographia was written in the late 1400s by a Bendician monk named Johannes Trithemius. On the surface, the book reads like a medieval superstition. Instructions with working with angels, spirits, invisible forces, how to communicate across long distances, to influence outcomes, really to make things happen without physically being there. And that alone was enough to make people pretty nervous. But here's where it gets interesting. Later scholars realized something a little bit strange. See, much of Steganographia isn't actually about spirits at all. It's coded communication, hidden messages, really these layered meanings. And it's got this information concealed inside these prayers, these symbols, and these different types of rituals. In other words, the magic was the disguise itself. Now, more modern scholars claim that the genius of the book wasn't that it claimed humans could work with invisible forces, which the book did do, but that it demonstrated a far more dangerous idea, that knowledge can be hidden in plain sight and still produce real-world effects. Now, at the time, this was a major threat to the powers that be, the zeitgeist, and it posed a direct threat that you don't need permission, that you don't need intermediaries. You just need to know how to encode the actual messages. So obviously, this is why the church banned this book. And it wasn't because everyone necessarily believed in angels, but because a book that teaches people how to act at a distance, how to move information without oversight, how to influence without direct intermediaries, this broke the entire model of control. See, we had the visible authority, church, permission, and then there was the hidden knowledge that showed methodologies, direct access. And again, this is what people usually miss. Steganographia isn't necessarily just about angels, it's about access. Who gets it, who doesn't, and who decides. And once you understand that, you start to see the pattern. Because if one monk figured out how to disguise power inside symbols, somebody else was eventually going to systematize it. And that's exactly where book number 2 comes in. Because Steganographia proves that power can be hidden, but it doesn't explain the rules behind it. The next author tried to do exactly that. If this wasn't just secrecy, if this wasn't just a clever disguise, then the real question is, what if there is an actual structure behind all of this? And that's where things stop looking mythical and start looking deliberate. If Steganographia shows that power can be hidden, the next question is obvious. Hidden according to what rules? And that question bothered Henrik Cornelius Agrippa. Now, Agrippa wasn't a mystic writing in isolation. He was a physician, a lawyer, a scholar, deeply educated in theology, mathematics, astronomy, and classical philosophy. And instead of disguising power, Agrippa did something far more dangerous. He organized it. In 3 books of the occult philosophy, Agrippa lays out a structured view of reality, not as chaos, not as superstition, but as a layered system. A universe with rules. The top layer being intellectual, divine. The middle being celestial, mathematical. And the bottom being elemental, physical, ordered cosmos. See, Agrippa argued that everything in the physical world connects upwards through numbers, symbols, proportions, and correspondence. Meaning events don't just happen randomly, they follow patterns. And if you understand those patterns, you don't need to beg reality to change. You simply align with it. And that's the shift Agrippa introduced. This wasn't about faith. It wasn't about belief. It was about knowledge. And this is obviously why the church reacted so strongly to Agrippa. A system that explains how reality works and teaches people how to operate within it removes the need for intermediaries. It turns prayer into process, and that's not a small threat. That is a complete reframe of power. Are you noticing a trend here? Now, this is where people usually misunderstand Agrippa. They assume that he was saying, think harder and reality will obey. That's not what he meant. Agrippa was not focused on force. He was focused on alignment. But that raises an even deeper problem. If reality has a structure and humans can learn from it, what actually activates the system? Because knowing the rules isn't enough. Someone still has to move the pieces. And that's where the third book changes everything. But before we go there, if you want to understand where it is that you might be misaligned, I built a short assessment that you can take. Click the link below and it'll walk you through it all. This next author didn't just study the system, he asked a way more dangerous question. What if the human mind itself is the activating force? Now, up to this point, everything could still feel a little bit abstract. Hidden knowledge, system rules. But Giordano Bruno did not stay abstract. He asked questions that made everything personal. If reality has a structure and the structure can be understood, what actually moves it? And Bruno's answer was dangerous. Not angels, not rituals, not symbols on their own, the human mind. He wrote a lot about magic and bonds. And Bruno described how influence actually works, not through force, through vincula, through bonds, mental images, desires, imagination, attention. Bruno argued that what captures the mind binds the person, and what binds the people moves the world. This wasn't metaphorical, it was mechanical. Image, desire, attention. Now, Bruno wasn't saying believe hard enough that reality obeys. He was saying something more unsettling, that humans are constantly shaping outcomes through what they imagine, through what they fixate on, through what they emotionally charge. And most people do it unconsciously, and that is the actual danger. And this is why Bruno terrified institutions. If imagination is casual, then control depends on the controlling images, narratives, symbols, stories, not behavior, perception. And that's not a theological problem, that's a political one. And Bruno paid for this idea with his life. After years of imprisonment, he was executed in Rome in 1600, and afterwards, his works were placed on the index. And not because he practiced magic, but because he reframed where power actually lives. Now here's the problem. If Bruno was right, then imagination isn't mystical, it's functional. But that raises a final, unavoidable question in the mind: who can move reality? And what does that say about God? And what happens if God isn't separate from nature at all? That's where this last banned book becomes impossible to ignore. Now, up until now, there's always been a way to dismiss this, right? Hidden codes, cosmic system, imagination as influence. And you could say that, oh man, this is all symbolic, right? This is mystical, this is woo-woo, this is just some weird philosophy. But our final blacklisted author, Spinoza, removes all of that. Now, Spinoza didn't write about magic, he didn't write about rituals, he wrote about reality itself. In Ethics, Spinoza makes a claim so simple it's unsettling, that God is not separate from nature. God is nature. Everything that exists, including the human mind, is an expression of the exact same underlying substance. And that changes everything, because if the human mind is part of nature, and nature is God, then human thought isn't outside of the system, it's inside of it. Your ideas aren't floating above reality, they are movements within it. And that's why Spinoza was banned, and it wasn't because he denied God, but because he removed the middleman. If understanding reality gives you power, and the mind is capable of understanding reality, then power doesn't belong exclusively to institution, it belongs to those who see clearly. Spinoza also believed that freedom doesn't come from forcing the world, it comes from understanding it, from moving from passive reactions to active awareness, from being controlled by causes that you don't see to participating in causes you do. That's not manifestation, that is alignment with reality. Passive, active. And this is where everything clicks. The hidden codes, the structured cosmos, the imagination as force, they weren't separate ideas. They were early attempts to describe the same truth from different angles. Spinoza just said it plainly. And once you see this, most modern manifestation talk starts to feel really small. It's not wrong, it's just incomplete. Because the deeper idea was never about getting things. It was about understanding what kind of being you actually are inside of a system you're already a part of. And that's why these books were banned. And that's why these books mattered. Not because they promise power, but because they quietly redefine where power always lived. If you want to explore this more, there's a link below. Peace, and I'll see you in the next.